psychologically, emotionally, and physically. We can get through this crisis. We can get through together, supporting one another, so that hopefully we can prevent something like this from ever happening again.
And to nominate someone you think should be a CNN hero, go to cnnheroes.com right now. You are live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta in Washington. A day before the president visits the site of the Uvalde, Texas mass shooting, Vice President Kamala Harris just called for an assault weapons ban. She was in Buffalo, New York today to attend the funeral of one of the victims of the mass shooting in that city.
We know what works on this. It includes, let's have an assault weapons ban. You know what an assault weapon is? You know how an assault weapon was designed? It was designed for a specific purpose, to kill a lot of human beings quickly. An assault weapon is a weapon of war with no place in a civil society.
After back-to-back mass shootings, Republicans are looking elsewhere for answers. Just in the last 2 days, GOP Senators Ted Cruz and Ron Johnson and former President Donald Trump floated a laundry list of reasons for the country's mass shooting epidemic. Want to hear them? Here they are. They include video games, social media, wokeness, critical race theory, absent fathers, declining church attendance, too many doors at schools, and the list goes on and on. But one thing not on their list is the one thing that is unique to the United States of America: hundreds of millions of guns and minimal restrictions for acquiring them. To be sure, gun violence in the U.S. is a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted solution. But GOP leaders are willing to consider every facet except this glaring one. This debate is raging as a devastating picture emerges about Tuesday's massacre in Uvalde, Texas, that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. It is now clear mistakes were made and warning signs were missed. CNN has learned in the weeks before the massacre at Robb Elementary, the gunman was posting rape threats on social media and flat out saying he was going to carry out a school shooting. That key detail emerged just hours after Texas law enforcement admitted to critical mistakes in response to the shooting. CNN is also getting new information about how authorities ultimately engaged with the shooter on Tuesday. Specialized Border Patrol agents entered the classroom with a shield, and the gunman emerged from a closet and began firing at them. CNN's Jason Carroll has more on the timeline of events.
I was misled. I am livid about what happened.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott aiming his ire at law enforcement.
My expectation is that the law enforcement leaders that are leading the investigations, which includes the Texas Rangers and the FBI, they get to the bottom of every fact with absolute certainty.
After damning new admissions from Texas authorities,
it was a wrong decision, period.
The incident commander making the decision not to immediately enter the classroom the gunman was in.
A decision was made that this was a barricaded subject situation. There was time to retrieve the keys and wait for a tactical team with the equipment to go ahead and breach the door and take on the subject at that point.
Officials explained how the shooter got into the school.
Where we knew the shooter entered, Ramos, was propped open by a teacher.
Investigators clarifying the timeline as police arrived.
The 3 initial police officers that arrived went directly to the door, and 2 received grazing wounds at that time from the suspect while the door was closed. At 11:37, there was more gunfire. Another 16 rounds was fired at 11:37. One at 11:37 and 16 seconds, 11:38, 11:40, 11:44. At 11:51, a police sergeant and USB agents started to arrive. At 12:03, officers continued to arrive in the hallway, and there were as many as 19 officers at that time in that hallway.
Officers did not enter the room until a janitor provided keys.
They breached the door using keys that they're able to get from the janitor because both doors were locked. Though both of the classrooms that he shot into were locked when officers arrived. They killed the suspect at that time.
In that crucial time, survivors inside both classrooms made desperate calls to 911.
She identified herself and whispered, she's in room 112. At 12:10, she called back, and room 12 advised her multiple dead. 12:13, again she called on the phone. Again at 12:16, she called back and said there was 8 to 9 students alive.
Minutes later, a student called.
Student child called back and was told to stay on the line and be very quiet. She told 911 that he shot the door. At approximately 12:43 and 12:47, she asked 911 to please send the police now.
Alfred Garza says his daughter Amory may have been one of those students who tried to call 911. She was killed during the shooting.
Something's got to be done now. You know, where do we go from here? You know, you were wrong. What do we do now? You know, it's my question. What are we gonna do now?
The accountability you were talking
the
about.
accountability. You know, somebody's got to be responsible.
Warning signs missed.
That Ramos asked his sister to help him buy a gun. She flatly refused. That was in September of 21.
With social media group chats and posts as far back as last February offering red flags.
He had Instagram, a 4-group chat, and it was discussed that Ramos being a school shooter. That was on February 28th of 2022. On March 14th, and there was an Instagram posting by the subject, in quotations, 10 more days. A user replied, "Are you going to shoot up school or something?" The subject replied, "No, and stop asking dumb questions and you'll see."
The governor here says he expects new laws to be passed to address what happened here. He also says expect both the FBI and the Texas Rangers to investigate every law enforcement official that was involved with what happened. Jason Carroll, CNN, Uvalde, Texas.
The massacre in Uvalde has brought back painful memories for the victims of other school shootings, including one that shook the nation more than 20 years ago. On April 20th, 1999, a pair of Columbine high school students killed 12 students and a teacher and injured more than 24 others before taking their own lives. My next two guests are both survivors of the Columbine school shooting, as well as teachers who are now part of a support network for the survivors of other mass tragedies. Kiki Leyba and Heather Martin join me now. Thanks to both of you. I know it must be so painful to go over this all over again, but we appreciate it so much. Kiki, let me start with you first. To this day, you teach at Columbine. What was it like when you heard about the shooting in Uvalde, I guess, or for that matter, any other school shooting or mass shooting that we hear about these days?
All right. It's just horrific. It's sickening. It's just a moving between sadness and anger and just outrage that this continues to happen.
And Heather, you were at Columbine. You were a senior in 1999 when you had to barricade yourself with dozens of other students in the high school choir room. Obviously, the kids in Uvalde are much younger. They're 10 and 11 years old. How did surviving that shooting impact your life? What has it been like? And I guess what can these kids look to in terms of what they might expect?
I think, well, for starters, I struggled a lot after the shooting. The summer afterward, I graduated. I was a senior. So going off to college was really hard. And basically, what I think is really hard for everyone that experiences a shooting like this is when you go off into the world and you're surrounded by people who don't get it and who don't understand. That was really, really difficult for me. And I struggled a lot. I ended up dropping out of college. And I think the most dangerous part for me was comparing my own trauma to other people's. Like saying, hey, mine wasn't so bad. I didn't lose a loved one. I wasn't shot. So I should be fine. I should be fine. And I kept telling myself that. And the truth was that I wasn't fine.
Yeah. And Kiki, we heard an account about an 11-year-old girl in Uvalde I'm sure you've heard the story. She smeared the blood of another student all over herself to pretend she was dead, and other students are terrified to even go to the school again. Let's listen to this.
Do you ever want to go back to school?
I don't want to know what, because I don't want anything to do with another shooting and me in the school.
You scared it might happen again?
Mm-hmm. And I know it might happen again, probably.
I have the fear of guns now, because I'm scared someone might shoot me.
Because he was asking me, does he have to go to school next year? And I just don't want him to be afraid of school. I want him to continue learning and not be scared, you know, of going back to school. Yes. I want him to have a normal life again.
It just breaks your heart listening to those beautiful little kids. Kiki, what advice would you give to those families?
That is, it's just awful, especially for children so young. But at any age, even college-age students, returning to school, the thought of it is terrifying. And I think that those conversations, with kids that are older, that they certainly have to happen. It's so difficult to imagine or frame a conversation with a child that is, first grade, second grade, talking about such horrific things, and it shouldn't even have to be a conversation. But students that are older, thought of returning in the fall or any time after a shooting is just traumatic, and the thing that gets you through it is that sense of togetherness, the sense of community, your peers, friends, family, and going through it, walking through it together, and obviously some counseling, trauma therapists, and just all the support that we can possibly throw at staff, at students, and families in the aftermath of these tragedies.
And Heather, as we were saying earlier, it's been more than 20 years since Columbine, and this keeps happening over and over again. Did you think it would, end up like this, where we would just be in this cycle of mass violence, where it just happens over and over again?
Definitely not. Unfortunately for me, and I don't know why this is, it really doesn't make sense to me either, but I am surprised every time. Like, I can't believe it's happening every time. And it really does make me, angry. It brings up a lot of past issues that I've had. And I can't imagine that we are where we are today, 23 years later after Columbine.
Yeah. And Kiki, after these school shootings, we've heard Republicans say that teachers should be armed and that the solution is more good guys with guns. We actually heard that at the NRA convention yesterday, just after what happened in Uvalde. Well, I guess, what would you say to that?
I think it's ridiculous. I've never met a teacher that thinks it's a good idea. I think bringing guns into schools is a wild card, and it's a ridiculous idea, and it's not addressing the problem in any way. It's just simply them deflecting and trying to protect their love of Second Amendment rights and guns, and that seems to supersede the safety of our schools, churches, grocery stores, our children. I think the idea of arming teachers is simply ridiculous. Cruz and his idea of single door, again, another ridiculous idea, and just deflecting from what the problem is.
And Heather, what do you think?
I know that I do not want to be armed in my classroom at all. That is not something that I would ever want to do, and I think that that is much more dangerous than people are considering.
Yeah, and especially with all the school shootings that we've had in this country, I suppose there might be the prospect, and you both are living proof of this, where you could have a school shooting survivor who becomes a teacher who is then asked to have a firearm in the classroom if some of these proposals were to come to fruition. It's mind-boggling. It's just mind-boggling. Kiki Leyba, Heather Martin, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Coming up, there's been a long history of congressional inaction when it comes to gun control, but is there a path forward now?
We'll be landing shortly in South Africa.
Sunny day in Cape Town and
We invite you with open arms to our wonderful country.
Zenith El Primero. Now this is a watch with a story. It was launched in 1969, and the name El Primero means the first in Spanish, because it was among the first automatic chronographs. But a few years later, the brand is bought by Zenith Radio Corporation. Zenith, the American corporation, ordered Zenith, the Swiss watch brand, to stop producing mechanical watches, and so the El Primero disappeared. But one crafty employee named Charles Vermeau hid the tools in all of the plans and designs. So when the ownership changed again in the 1970s, everything they needed to create the El Primero all over again was there. And in 1984, the El Primero roared back onto the stage, and again to the delight of the watch world.
This is an increasingly visual world, and at our core, at a core of our business, what do? We help businesses connect and compete in that visual landscape. And so, whether that's small businesses and how they need to compete through our iStock brand, or whether that's corporations as they struggle to how to have a presence across TikTok and Instagram and all the platforms that they need to be present on, we see just a huge amount of demand for our service. And then with the growth of video, increasingly, being a medium in which not only the media needs to produce, but corporations and businesses need to have a video presence. That's another core driver of this business. But we see a lot of growth opportunities across Getty Images.
What's it like to be Barry Manilow?
He writes the songs that make the whole world sing.
Oh, look, a piano.
Oh, imagine that.
Fans love him.
You're one of my idols.
Critics, not always.
It wasn't just one critic, it was all of them.
Join me as I ask Barry Manilow about being famous.
There were a couple of years there that I was a brat.
Being inspired.
My proudest moment as a songwriter.
And being an icon for decades.
Being Barry Manilow, Tuesday on CNN.
In Washington, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are facing enormous pressure to act in the wake of the horrific events in Uvalde, Texas. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says he has directed Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas to engage with Democrats on a bipartisan solution on gun violence. A meeting was held Thursday, but the battle to find common ground will be steep.
The truth of the matter is these people are going to commit these horrifying crimes, whether they have to use another weapon to do it with. They're going to figure out a way to do it.
I can't assure the American people there's any law we can pass to stop this shooting.
You know, inevitably, when there's a murder of this kind, you see politicians try to politicize it. You see Democrats and a lot of folks in the media whose immediate solution is to try to restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens.
Joining me now is Democratic Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island. Back in 2016, he was one of the organizers of a 26-hour sit-in on the House floor to protest gun violence and demand congressional action to address gun violence. In the years that followed, he proposed an assault weapons ban. Congressman Cicilline, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Time and again, after every mass shooting, there are lawmakers like yourself who have tried to harness the anguish of the nation to finally get something done on gun control, but it just doesn't happen. It's failed over and over again. Do you think this time is any different?
I hope so. Look, the young people that you just had on your show who are speaking about being afraid to go back to school. I mean, elementary school is supposed to be a time of great joy and pleasure and fun. And these are kids who are afraid to go back to school. We have a gun violence epidemic in this country. We've had over 200 mass shootings this year, 27 school shootings this year alone. And this is a really serious problem. And the idea that because we can't pass a law that will end gun violence completely, we should do nothing, which the two senators just suggested, is absurd. We can do something about this. We can pass a set of bills that will help to reduce gun violence in this country. We've passed two already, one to strengthen criminal background checks, one to close the Charleston loophole to make sure people who don't pass a background check can't get a gun. These are very common sense, supported by 90% of the American people. They're not even controversial, but the Republicans in the Senate are blocking them. So I hope we're going to pass more common sense bills out of the House, send them to the Senate, and continue to press for their passage and get them to the president's desk. But this is an epidemic, and we have got to do something about it. It's sickening to watch case after case, individual after individual, shooting after shooting, and the carnage and the devastation it's causing families and communities. And the idea of like, oh, there's nothing we can do about it, that's baloney.
And earlier today, Vice President Kamala Harris called for an assault weapons ban. We don't always hear a message that clearly articulated. Does this one have to be clear from Democratic leaders? And I mean, what do you say to your Republican colleagues? They have the filibuster over in the Senate. You can pass all the bills you want in the House, but over in the Senate, you need 60 votes.
Right. Well, we have 205 co-sponsors of the assault weapons ban, and remember, these were weapons that were designed for wartime. They are designed to kill as many people as quickly as possible. When we had an assault weapons ban in effect, there was a significant decline in mass shootings. Once the assault weapons ban expired, mass shootings tripled. So we know this works. These are weapons that don't belong in our communities. In almost all of the mass shootings in recent history, they've involved an assault weapon. And so we should ban those as well. But look, the Senate has the filibuster rule, but we should continue to do our job and pass whatever we can in the House and send it to the Senate so we can keep pressing them to take action. If we don't pass stuff out of the House simply because the Senate won't pass it, we could go home and do nothing because of the filibuster. There's so much of our work sitting on the Senate Majority Leader's desk because it can't get past the filibuster. But look, the American people are demanding that we do something, that there are a number of bills in the House that will significantly reduce gun violence in this country. And we owe it to the victims of gun violence, to people who are worried about it, to take action. And that's why I think you will see the House Judiciary Committee mark up a series of bills and the House pass them. And then the pressure will be on the Senate to do their job, protect their constituents, reduce gun violence in this country once and for all.
And yesterday, gun control opponents met at the National Rifle Association convention in Houston, a 4-hour drive from Uvalde. And we heard from Texas GOP Senator Ted Cruz repeat that talking point that good guys with guns are what's needed. Obviously, that didn't work, though, in Uvalde. It's very clear that the police officers were in the hallway there, and they didn't barge in and kill the gunman. How can you get anywhere on this issue if the other side has dug in their heels and they're just going to repeat the same talking points over and over again?
Yeah. I mean, this whole idea that if everyone had a gun, if there were just more guns, we'd be safer. If that were actually true, America would be the safest country in the world in terms of gun violence, because there are over 400 million guns in this country, more guns than people. And so that idea is absurd. And the notion of just promoting gun sales, that's what the gun manufacturers want. That's what the NRA wants, the gun lobby. It's about promoting the sale of guns to maximize profits for these big gun manufacturers. And to hear those talking points of like, if everyone just had a gun, the teacher and the principal and everyone else in the school, I mean, the idea of injecting more guns into schools as a solution is horrifying, and it's bad public policy. It should never happen, and it's a way to distract from the real issues, and that is the unwillingness of our Republican colleagues to work with us on common sense gun safety legislation that will reduce gun violence in this country. This is a peculiarly American problem. We have a gun violence epidemic in this country unlike anywhere else in the world, and there's a reason for it, and it's because it's too easy for dangerous people, people with serious mental illness, criminals, to get access to firearms in America.
Congressman, you sit on the Judiciary Committee, and right now the Supreme Court has a 6-3 conservative majority and might be on the verge of taking down one of the nation's oldest and most restrictive gun control laws. It involves restrictions that in New York State, where there was that mass shooting in Buffalo just 2 weeks ago today, and those restrictions are placed on who can carry a gun in public. How worried are you about that?
I'm very worried about that. This is a New York statute that says you have to have a justification to carry a concealed weapon. You have to demonstrate some need. The Supreme Court has always recognized the rights of states and localities to restrict firearms, to limit the kind of firearm you can possess, to limit where you can take them. But we now have new justices on the court who have a very different view of the Second Amendment, and they've shown by the leaked Roe versus Wade reversal that they don't feel bound by precedent. And so I think there's a lot of reason to be concerned that this Supreme Court is actually going to make it easier for people to have access to firearms, to remove reasonable restrictions that are intended to reduce gun violence in this country. And I think it's, like so many, I'm very concerned about what the Supreme Court's going to do in this area as well.
All right, Congressman David Cicilline, thank you very much. We've invited a number of Republican lawmakers to come on. They didn't accept our invitation, but if they're out there listening right now, give us a call. We'll have you on. Congressman, thanks very much. Coming up, as President Biden prepares to visit Uvalde, Texas, Vice President Kamala Harris attends the funeral of another mass shooting victim in Buffalo.
Enough is enough. We will come together based on what we all know we have in common, and we will not let those people who are motivated by hate separate us or make us feel fear.
I'm Nick Watt in Los Angeles, and this is CNN.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
Malumness, it's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore CNN.com/impact. Click to take action.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for a market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
I'm Patrick Ottman in Havana, Cuba, and this is CNN.
Vice President Kamala Harris is urging lawmakers to take action on gun reform, calling for a ban on assault weapons and enhanced background checks.
On the issue of gun violence, I will say, as I've said countless times, we are not sitting around waiting to figure out what the solution looks like. You know, we're not looking for a vaccine. We know what works on this. It includes, let's have an assault weapons ban.
This morning, Harris visited the site of the racist supermarket shooting in Buffalo, New York. She also attended a funeral for Ruth Whitfield, who was the oldest of the 10 victims in that attack. In her remarks at the service, Harris warned America is facing a, quote, epidemic of hate. CNN's Joe Johns is here with us now from Buffalo. Joe, tell us more about the vice president's visit.
Well, Jim, the remarks came in two different tranches, if you will. There was what happened out at the airport, where she talked more about politics, assault weapons ban, expanded background checks, the back and forth that's going on Capitol Hill right now. Of course, some of that is controversial, but the guidance initially when she was headed up here to Buffalo from Washington was that she did not want to speak, at least at this funeral for Ruth Whitfield, the 86-year-old woman, the oldest person who was killed in this shooting spree 2 weeks ago today. But she didn't want to speak at this because she was concerned that if she made remarks, it would be deemed political. But that all changed when Al Sharpton, who was delivering the eulogy, said he was breaking protocol and asked her to speak anyway. And she got up and talked, and one of the things she talked about was trying to find a common thread for Americans to hang their hats on. And that common thread throughout so many of these mass shootings around the country, she said, would be fighting back against the fear. Listen.
We will not allow small people to create fear in our communities, that we will not be afraid to stand up for what is right, to speak truth even when it may be difficult to hear and speak. There's a through line. What happened here in Buffalo, in Texas, in Atlanta, in Orlando? What happened at the synagogues? And so this is a moment that requires all good people, all God-loving people, to stand up and say, we will not stand for this. Enough is enough. We will come together based on what we all know we have in common, and we will not let those people who are motivated by hate separate us or make us feel fear.
She also visited the top supermarket, the scene of the crime, and took some flowers with her. And she talked to family members of the victims as well. One thing seems very clear, Jim, the administration trying to send a message to Buffalo that they support the city and they're concerned about what happened. Back to you.
Yeah, Joe, absolutely. I mean, after Uvalde, we can't forget what happened in Buffalo. It was just 2 weeks ago today. Hard to wrap your head around something like that. It was just 2 weeks ago. It feels like a lot longer than that. Joe, thank you very much. Coming up, the war in Ukraine through a mother's eyes as she takes shelter in a basement with her 3 young children.
The data shows that the Caribbean and Latin America have some of the highest rates of sex crimes in the world, and sex crimes ties into human trafficking. My name is Jonathan Bagan. I'm based in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm an attorney at law and also chairman of the Caribbean Committee Against Sex Crimes. Say 10 years ago, it was said, even in my country, that nobody should speak out about human trafficking because they will come to get you, the mafia. Now that hundreds of people know about it and are speaking out against it, that darkness has been destroyed, and now we're bringing the issue into the light. Schools across Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, the students were really positive about it. They wrote poems, spoken word poems, they made videos.
I've risen and believed.
And those videos went on to the local media, onto the radio and television.
On arrival, you are forced into captivity and a life of servitude.
So the students were inspired to see their fellow students being connected to CNN International. A lot of kids now know the signs of human trafficking, what it is and how to avoid it. So we may have saved some lives. My Freedom Day helped raise awareness, educate children, and I hope it inspires politicians and the governments across the region to do more to stop this crime from happening. It's impactful and important, and we hope to do even better next year.
My name is Stephen Jameson, Global Head of Circular Economy Solutions at SAP. The aim of a circular economy is to eliminate waste, circulate materials, keep products in use as long as possible, and regenerate natural systems. We're talking about a fundamental reworking of how we deliver the economy. At the moment, we're based upon an extractive system which depends upon nature, but is ultimately extractive. That will only go one way in the long term. A regenerative economy ultimately creates abundance of opportunity, abundance of materials, abundance of resources that enable us to thrive as a species and thrive as a piece of nature and as a part of nature.
To open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of a camera.
Trust that you'll listen.
So great that you're here today. It just highlights what's making a difference.
That you'll be honest. I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them? Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair. It was an unprecedented move, very eerie. All the roads have been closed off. Describe the theme that you arrived to. The Apache attack helicopter. This is what Captain Wales has been flying. Do you want talks with them?
What is the point of talking now?
Huge amounts of police support coming into this protest. We continue to monitor the government in crisis. This was the Duchess's first news interview. Rare access indeed. That's what it's all about. Max Foster, CNN.
It's been 100 days since Brittany Griner was detained in Russia, and her fellow WNBA players are urging President Biden to get her home. In a statement released today, the Women's National Basketball Association said, quote, Brittany Griner is our teammate, our friend, and our sister. She is a record breaker, a gold medalist, a wife, a daughter, a champion, a role model, an all-star, and so much more. Right now, BG is an American citizen who has been wrongfully detained in Russia for 100 days. That's 144,000 minutes. Griner was originally taken into custody back in February after she was stopped at an airport in Moscow for allegedly having cannabis oil in her bag. For months, we've seen horrific images of the war in Ukraine, but here's something you have not seen. It's the war through the eyes of a mother as she shelters in a basement with her 3 children in Kyiv. Her name is Olena Ganes, and CNN's Anderson Cooper met her in Kyiv and profiles her family's odyssey in a special AC 360 that airs tomorrow night. Here's Anderson with a preview.
Thanks, Jim. You know, we've all seen a lot of images of the war in Ukraine, but this is something you really haven't seen. It's the war through the eyes of one mother as she shelters in a basement with her 3 children in Kyiv. Her name is Olena Ganes, and before Russia invaded, she was a tour guide, and she used to post videos about her family and about life in Ukraine on YouTube. But when the bombs started falling, she kept recording, and she decided to make basically a video diary of what she and her husband and kids were experiencing as they moved into a basement shelter, never knowing if they'd survive through the night. I talked to Olena on 360 since the early days of the war and was able to finally meet her just a couple of weeks ago in Kyiv. But when I realized just how much video she'd shot and I started to watch it, I realized what an extraordinary thing it was that she had created. It's a view of the war that we've rarely seen before. It's very intimate and poignant. It's very personal, and she's really just a lovely, thoughtful, caring person. This is the war diary of Olena Ganes. Here's a brief clip.
In the morning, against all odds, Kyiv is still in Ukrainian control.
So the latest update is that we are alive. I am alive. This is Darina. She's sleeping on the floor. Yes, some other people in the shelter woke up. It's already morning. It's like more than 7 o'clock in the morning. Katya and Taras are sleeping on a small sofa here. It's very important that we survived this night. Now the day has come. You know, at night everything looks much more scary for people. So as you can see, even many people left the bomb shelter right now because it's more than 7 o'clock in the morning.
Many in Kyiv are leaving. Long lines of cars clog the roads heading west. Train stations around the country fill with families trying to get out. Olena decides she and the kids will stay.
I feel safe here. The chances for us to die here in Kiev are equal to the chances for us to die on the road somewhere. And another thing, I want my children to be alive, of course. but both physically and spiritually. I want them to be strong. I want them to be free.
Elena's husband, Sergei, brings supplies for his family. He's volunteered to fight despite having no military training.
Так треба, така штучка, щоб...
Що ти сьогодні робив?
Не можу сказати, пока.
Пока.
He leaves quickly to rejoin his unit.
А куди тато? Мамо, я хочу до тата. Я теж. А куди тато пішов?
Тато пішов нас захищати.
На війну.
Her family, like so many others, have been through so much, and it's really given them a lot of strength to know that the world is watching what happens in Ukraine. So I really hope you can watch this Sunday night. I think you'll come away with a whole new understanding of the war in Ukraine and what people are going through. Jim?
Thanks, Anderson. Be sure to tune in. A Mother's Diary of War airs tomorrow night at 8 p.m. right here on CNN. We'll be right back.
When you dream more, you need to move more. With over 45% of sub-Saharan Africa using mobile money, innovative digital payment solutions are giving people financial freedom. Access FacePay uses AI to make transactions more secure and accessible for over 31 million customers. Access. More than banking.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday on CNN.
We share this place, we all belong. We have to restore this planet's soul.
Out front tonight, a potential breakthrough in treating coronavirus.
We've gotten very little help from the federal government.
Could all this spending lead to a bigger economic crisis? One of our viewers saw you last night on the show. She says she's going to pay your rent this month. Shut up. I want to go now to an incredible story of survival. Would you do it all again in terms of being a nurse, knowing that that could put you at risk for this?
I want to help people more than I ever have.
Aaron Burnett out front on CNN.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore CNN.com/impact. Click to take action.
I'm Will Ripley in Taipei, Taiwan, and this is CNN.
Another member of the sports world is speaking out after the horrific massacres in Uvalde and Buffalo. San Francisco Giants manager Gabe Kapler publicly decrying the state of the country in a new interview.
I just don't plan on coming out for the anthem going forward until I feel like I feel better about the direction of our country. So that'll be the step. I don't expect it to move the needle necessarily. It's just something that I feel strongly enough about to take that step.
CNN's Andy Scholes takes a look at the other emotional responses coming from all corners of the sports world this week.
Well, in wake of what happened in Uvalde, sports figures and teams have been using their voice to advocate for change. And Warriors head coach Steve Kerr on the day of the shooting was very emotional, demanding politicians do more.
When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. We are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
On Wednesday, the Heat and Celtics held a moment of silence for the lives lost. And then their public address announcer delivered this message.
The Heat urges you to contact your state senators by calling 202-224-3121 to leave a message demanding their support for common sense gun laws. You can also make change at the ballot box. Visit heat.com/vote to register and let your voice be heard this fall.
And the Warriors with a very similar message advocating for common sense gun laws before Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals. And Kerr again speaking out that day, saying we as a country need to start thinking of gun control as a public health issue.
For whatever reason, it's a political issue, but it's really a public health issue. So as soon as we can just shift the dynamic to this being a public health issue, then you get momentum. So what I'm asking people to do is to get involved in their local communities. I've got lots of friends who are Democrats. I got lots of friends who are Republicans. And all I know is they all want gun violence to go away.
The Yankees and Rays in Major League Baseball, meanwhile, teaming up. Instead of tweeting about their game, they presented facts about gun violence in our country. The Rays adding, this cannot become normal. We cannot become numb. We cannot look the other way. We all know if nothing changes, nothing changes. Dodgers manager Dave Roberts, meanwhile, says politicians have failed the country.
How there can't be a bipartisan consensus on an issue like this is very disheartening, is very irresponsible by our nation's leaders. And something needs to be done and be proactive about it because, like everyone has said, enough is enough. When is enough enough?
LeBron James tweeting that there simply has to be change, has to be, while NFL Network's Rich Eisen made a passionate plea for something to be done.
We cannot give up. We cannot give up as a society, and we cannot give up on giving our 2 cents and keeping the pressure on those in power who do nothing about it Children murdered in their classroom. Murdered in their classroom.